Good morning and welcome back to my channel. Today I am just tackling my to-do list. I have a bunch of sort of random tasks that I need to get done today. I'm starting out in the garden picking some beans because there's quite a bit out here, and I'm planning to can a batch within the next couple days, potentially even this afternoon depending on how my day goes. So we'll just see how things play out. Also on my to-do list is making some maple bacon. When we had our pigs butchered, I had the butcher make some of our bacon, and then I also had asked for some of the pork belly to be saved so that I could try my hand at making it as well, and I have just been putting that off. So it's time to deal with that today. I also want to get some beeswax rendered, and I need to spend a little bit of time in the canning room getting it organized. I have some jars that need to be put away, and I also just need to make some space for jars that are going to be coming in over the next month or so. All right, I'm back inside with my beans. I'm gonna get these all put away. I likely am not going to actually deal with them until tomorrow, but I'll just see how the day goes. Potentially I'll be able to pressure can a batch this afternoon, but we'll just see how things play out. So first up, I want to get some beeswax rendered. I have a big bucket that needs to be dealt with, and the easiest way that I have found to do this is in a crock pot. So I just went ahead and got a really inexpensive crock pot from the thrift store. I think I spent $5 on them. I actually have two at this point just because these two are a little bit smaller capacity. So I'm gonna get those all filled up, ready to go, and I'll share that process with you. And then later today, we will have some rendered beeswax that I can use in some fun projects. Rendering beeswax in a crock pot is so simple. I just fill the crock pot about a third of the way full with water, and then I lay some cheesecloth over top. The cheesecloth is going to catch any impurities as the wax melts. Then I add in beeswax to fill the crock pot, and I just turn it on low. It'll take maybe an hour or two to fully melt, and then I typically will add more wax once I have the space to in the crock pot. So just make sure that the cheesecloth is draping over the edges enough that you can secure it. I typically just try to twist it around the top of the lid, and then I'm just going to leave that be while I handle a couple of the other things on my to-do list. And once all of the wax is melted, I'll turn it off, remove the cheesecloth with all of those impurities, make sure to squeeze out as much of the beeswax as you can from that. And as it cools, the beeswax is going to settle on the top of the crock pot, and it'll be really easy to remove. So I have the beeswax rendering, and I've gone ahead and pulled out the pork belly to make my bacon, and I have been putting this off for quite a while. I've just been really nervous that I'm going to mess this up, but I've read probably 20 different recipes on how to make bacon, looked at different methods, referenced a couple books that I have, and I'm hoping with all of that information it's enough that this turns out well. Now, it would probably be smart for me to test out a smaller batch of this, make sure we like it, but that's just not how I do things. So I've gone ahead and pulled out 12 pounds of pork belly, and I'm going to be turning all of that into bacon today. I'm also not going to be using curing salt. I'm only going to be using coarse salt so that this is nitrate free, and then I'm going to be using maple syrup to make this into a maple bacon. So I'll find out in a little over a week how this turned out and if I'm going to continue to let the butcher make the bacon or if I'm going to take that over. I cut both slabs of pork belly into about 3-pound pieces just so they'd better fit in the containers I'll be curing them in. After reading through a ton of recipes, I decided that per 6 pounds of pork belly, I'd use a third of a cup of coarse salt and a half tablespoon of ground black pepper. I'm keeping this super simple, but there are tons of ways that you can customize this. I'd love to try adding coffee grounds. We have a local restaurant that adds them, and it turns out so good. So if this batch works, maybe I'll try that in a future one. I sprinkled the salt and pepper over the pork belly and massaged it in really well. I didn't add the maple syrup in immediately because I wanted to make sure that salt was really evenly distributed and that I got it into all the nooks and crannies. Then I added a half cup of pure maple syrup, massaged that in, and then transferred to a large airtight container. It seems to be popular to do this in Ziploc bags or food saver bags, but this is just what I went with. These are going to hang out in the fridge for probably about a week, and I'll check on them daily, flipping them, and it will start to firm up. We don't have a smoker, so I'm not going to be smoking this bacon, but instead, after it's done curing, I'll rinse off all that salt and it'll bake in a 200-degree oven for a couple hours. Then I'll slice it up, get it into some food saver bags, and we will be stocked back up on bacon. So fingers crossed this turns out well. Once the wax I initially added had fully melted, I went ahead and topped off both crock pots again with more beeswax and then covered it up with the cheesecloth to continue rendering. I typically will do this a couple times throughout the process. I store my spices in half-pint jars. We buy a lot of our spices in bulk, at least the ones that we use a ton of, and I had a couple jars that needed to be refilled, so I'm just taking note of what I need to pull up while I'm organizing the canning room. I get asked pretty often where we shop for bulk food in Canada. Organic Matters is where I order from. They ship across Canada, and their US site is Essential Organic Ingredients. I have a bad habit of bringing down my canning from the kitchen, but then not actually putting it onto the shelves. So I had some to put away today from recent canning sessions, and I needed to shift some jars around, bringing anything from last year to the front to make sure we're rotating through the oldest items first. I have a lot of these shelves filled with empty jars right now, so as we continue to fill them up, I'll have to rotate more around down here. We are really running low on tomato products. I'll be doing lots of sauce and diced tomatoes this year, as well as salsa. You can't see our salsa, it's on the top shelf, but we are running low on my roasted tomato salsa, so that's going to be a big focus this year. I made a ton of tomato jam last year, so I'm not going to be doing any of that this year. We still have plenty. We also still have lots of dill pickles from last year, so I'll probably only end up doing a batch or two of those, but we are pretty set on those as well. I store my bulk spices and teas in 5-gallon buckets, and I just write on a piece of masking tape the spice name and tape it to the outside of the bucket. That way I can just remove it when we run out, and it's a reminder to me of what I need to stock up on, but also what I'm storing in each bucket, so it's easy to track things down. I did end up getting to the beans this afternoon, which is great. I wasn't sure that I would, so just washing those up and snapping them so that they're ready to go. At this point, the rest of the beeswax had melted, so I got that straining. The cheesecloth filters out any impurities, and it's easiest if you can secure the cheesecloth somewhere to allow it to strain off to make sure you're getting as much of the wax out of the cheesecloth as possible. You can't really tell here, but I just try and tie up the cheesecloth to a knob of a cabinet while it strains and turn off the heat. Once the wax is fully cooled, it'll form a solid puck of wax on top of the crock pot. I'm just pressure canning these green beans. That's the main way that we put them up. So I'm filling wide mouth pint jars to an inch of headspace, and I do try to pack them in there pretty well. You don't have to, but I like to add a half teaspoon of salt per pint jar, and the jars get topped off with water to an inch of headspace. I like to use a chopstick to debubble, and then just adjust the headspace if needed and add the lids and rings to fingertip tight. Then these beans are ready for the canner, so they're just going to process for 20 minutes. Once the crock pot has fully cooled, you get a nice brick of wax at the top. It's super easy to remove and it's ready to melt down and use for all sorts of projects. That wraps up today's video. Thank you for joining me today as I tackled a bunch of tasks that I've had on my to-do list for quite some time. I got 10 more pints of beans canned for the pantry and finally got to that bacon that I've just been putting off for quite some time. I'll see you in the next video.